Fiskar ma a hula duine agus fáilte go na video. Since we're at spooky season, I thought I would read a couple of Gaelic ghost stories. Obviously they're translated into English. Whether or not they were actually in Gaelic to begin with, I'm not entirely sure, but the book is called Gaelic Ghosts, and there are some Scots words in there as well, so I thought it'd be quite interesting and a little bit wholesome. So I hope you're all well, and I hope you enjoy the stories. The Ghost That Didn't Want to Be a Ghost. There used to be a Glasgow man who was in the way of keeping a house for travellers beyond the town on the Great Western Road. He was a grand one for telling tales of ghosts and eerie happenings, and could keep at it for hours at a stretch, or at any rate as long as he had breath enough left to tell them with. He made a point of never telling a story unless he could swear to it that it was the solemn truth. He'd tell the place and date it happened, and the name of the man or woman it happened to, so that anyone could go and prove it for himself. He had a great liking for one story, and told it often, about a ghost that didn't want to be a ghost. He said he got the story from the ghost of the old chief in the story. The old ghost used to stop in to keep him company now and then, when the Glasgow man was all alone in his place. The Glasgow man could take you into the town and show you the very house where it happened, because he knew the lad in the tale when he himself was a lad. The way it happened was that there was a clan of ghosts under an old Highland chief, one of the MacDonalds no doubt. At any rate, he was a fine old ghost, and when he was a living, breathing man, he had a great reputation for keeping all the clansmen and tenants under him well in hand, and making them like it into the bargain. When he got over into the spirit world, he used the same methods. They put a lot of ghosts under him there for him to be chief of, and it worked very well. In no time at all he had them taking their condition out of life as something that couldn't be helped and making the best of it. He even got them to feeling a certain pride and satisfaction in being ghosts and doing all they could to make success of their work. Everything was going along fine and easy, with every ghost of them busy and happy and the old chief proud of them all, when a new young ghost was sent over to take his place among them. It didn't take the ghosts of the old chief's clan long to find out he was not one of their kind at all. The fellow was always moping about in corners. He refused to find a place of his own to haunt, and when they went to the trouble of finding one for him, he didn't like it at all. You never met such a ghost for complaining. There was naught in the place that he couldn't find something wrong with. He said the house he was haunting in was too dark and damp and dismal, and it made him ache all over. He said he didn't care for the colour of his shroud, it being such a dirty shade of grey. He said that he didn't see why he should bother to go out haunting, when there was such a lot of them that seemed to enjoy doing it, while as for himself, he found no pleasure in it at all. Then there were those chains they all had to carry around and clank. They were far too heavy, he told them. Anyway, why fash themselves with chains? Och, 'twas all a pack of nonsense. They tried to reason with him, but it did no manner of good. He said he'd not asked anyone to let him be a ghost, and he'd not be pretending he liked to be one. He got very rude about it and told them to go on about their ghosting and just leave him be. So he just went along moping and complaining and wandering about aimlessly, getting into the way of the other ghosts and tripping them up because they were all too busy to notice that he was underfoot. He was taking all the fun out of it for the rest of them, and at last they decided that it was too much to be borne. So they got up a petition to hand to the chief. It was a grand, legal-looking paper, having been drawn up by one of them who'd been a solicitor in Glasgow before he happened to get to be a ghost. It stated their grievances against the discontented ghost and asked the chief to give his attention to relieving them. The old chief was so put out when he got the petition that he turned 2 or 3 shades paler. He felt so queer that he even looked over his shoulder at the window to see if day was coming, although he knew quite well that it had just turned midnight. It really did upset him. The like of it had never happened to him before, in one world or the other. So he sent for the discontented ghost and gave him the petition to read for himself. "What's come over you, lad?" roared the old chief. "What do you mean by setting the clan and all by the ears? You're putting the place in such an uproar that we'll be getting a bad name." "It's not me," said the young ghost sulkily. "It's them.
They're always going on at me about bracing up and being a proper ghost.
Well, why do you not do so then? The old chief asked. That would stop them.
Because I don't want to be a ghost at all, cried the discontented ghost. I never did want to be a ghost, either before or after I was one. I cannot thole it.
The answer struck the old chief dumb. He'd never met such a thing before. He really didn't know what to say. But before he gathered his wits together, the young ghost cried out in despair,
Can't I be something else instead of a ghost? Is there not something you could do about it?
The old chief had not headed 2 clans and 2 worlds without getting a very good knowledge of both human and ghost nature. This was not a matter he could settle by cajoling or arguing. He took a minute or 2 to think it over. Aye, said the old chief at last. I'd not be saying that what you ask is impossible, but you'll have to understand that it's not myself that has the last word. I'll have to be getting permission. I'll do the best I can. Go along now, and be a good lad. I'll let you know. It was maybe a matter of a week before the chief sent for the discontented ghost again. Well, lad, he said cheerfully, as soon as the young ghost came into the room. I'm to go ahead and find you something to suit you. I've been putting a lot of thought to the matter. How would it be if you just went back and were yourself again?
Well, I don't know about that,
said the young ghost doubtfully.
After all, it's been a long time since I left and they've got used to me being gone. Besides, folks might not like the idea of me coming back to life again.
Och, they'd like it fine. They'd jump at the chance to have you back, declared the old chief. But there's no need for haste. I'll tell you what to do. Just go and look things over on the quiet and see for yourself. So the young ghost did. He was back before the week was over. The old chief greeted him hopefully. I'm thinking you'll want to be leaving soon for home again, he said. We'll have to be getting you ready for it.
Och, nay, the young ghost replied. 'Twould never do at all. They've let my next younger brother have my room, and he's moved all his things into it with mine. The room's so full it's a regular dustbin, but the lad's daft about it. You see, it's the first time he's had a room all to himself because there were so many of us at home. I'd not have the heart to go back and take it from him. Then there's my job. They've given that to the young fellow I was breaking in. Ugh, the lad's got a young wife and a new bairn. I'd not want to go back and take the job from him. 'Twould not be fair at all.
Was there not a lass you were thinking to marry? Asked the chief.
You need not fash yoursel about that, said the young ghost with a smile. She'll be marrying my best friend soon. I'd not want to break that up.
The old chief looked shocked.
It's a very good thing, the young ghost hastened to reassure him. You see, it's this way. When I was living there were things I never noticed about her, but being away and going back again I saw things I'd never bothered about before. I'll grant you, she's a bonny lass. They don't come bonnier. But she's an awful one to be talking. I can see now that she talks a lot too much, and she says such silly things. My friend doesn't seem to mind it, but I could never put up with it. I'd be glad to go back for the sake of my mother and father. They'd welcome me back, for I know they love me and miss me, but it would bring trouble galore on them if I went back. What would the neighbours say? Besides, if something happened to me again, they'd just have all the grief of losing me to suffer all over. Nay, I'll no go back.
There's nothing we can do but to put you back in with somebody that's already in the world then, said the old chief. I'm warning you that it will not be comfortable at first having to fit yourself in with somebody else. You'll be finding yourself feeling awful crowded until you get yourself used to it.
I'd not be minding that, the young ghost said.
Well, what would you have a fancy for? Asked the chief. But nothing he mentioned pleased the young ghost. A doctor? They could probably find him a doctor to tuck him into.
Nay, you'll not do that,
the discontented ghost exclaimed. He knew all about doctors. His father was one. Up at all hours of the night they were, with never a chance at a whole meal any day of their lives, and hardly any time to get acquainted with their own bairns. He'd not want anything to do with the law either, for he couldn't take it upon himself to decide who was right or wrong. Farmers were alright, and he'd always liked the countryside, but they led such lonely lives and worked too hard. Being a schoolmaster wouldn't be too bad. He'd always liked bairns and had hoped to have half a dozen of his own. But the schoolmaster was always having to make his lads do things that they didn't want, like being quiet and sitting on hard benches and not squirming around. Besides, masters and lads seldom could make friends with each other. It was as if there was a wall between them and neither could get to the other side. Well, that was the way it went, with the old chief mentioning one thing after another and the young ghost turning each suggestion down. At last the old chief suggested wearily, "Maybe you'd fancy being a financier?" The young ghost brightened up.
That might suit me fine, he cried. It'd be grand to have money galore, but I'd like to go and make sure I'd like it before I decided.
"Go on then," said the old chief, thankful to be rid of him for a time at least. But the discontented ghost was back in a day or two.
There couldn't be anything worse, he told the chief. Making a lot of money is fine enough, but the men who make it have to be running around so hard all day making it, and then they lie awake all night worrying about losing it, so it ends up with their getting dyspepsia and nervous headaches and the like, till they nearly go daft. I'd not be suited at all with that sort of life.
"Well, I've nothing more to offer," said the old chief. "I've reached my wit's end. Can you not think of anything yourself?"
I'd not be saying I can at the moment, the young ghost replied, but I'll try. I'll go and look around a bit.
And he went away, leaving the old chief feeling so glad to see him go that he felt like a new ghost. It was quite a long time before he came back again, and the old chief had to look at him a couple of times before he recognised him. The air of discontent had dropped from him entirely, and he was as joyful as any ghost could be.
I've got it, he cried. 'Tis just the place for me.
"Good," the old chief exclaimed. "And what is it then?"
I want to be a cat,
announced the young ghost. "A cat?" The old chief couldn't believe his ears.
Aye, a cat.
And looking into the old chief's face, the young ghost begged,
Och, do not tell me I cannot. I've set my heart upon it.
"Och nay," the old chief hastened to say. "'Tis not that it can't be done. To be sure though, a cat's an awful wee bit of a thing, and it may take some trouble to fit you into it, but we could do it. As long as you're sure that's what you want."
I'm sure enough. What's more, I know well the very cat I want to be,
said the young ghost. He led the old chief down through the streets of the town to a house that stood on a quiet square. They went into the house and up into a bedroom. The room was dark except for a lamp that stood on a table near the bed. There was a wee lad in the bed. He had been very ill and had got over his illness, but there was so little interest in life left in him that he just lay there quietly and patiently, and there seemed to be nothing that could rouse him at all. His mother and father watched from either side of the bed, keeping their eyes upon his face and hoping he'd show some notice of them. The young ghost paid no attention to the people in the room. He led the chief to the foot of the bed and pointed to a kitten that lay there sleeping on the blanket, curled up into a small furry ball.
That's it, he said. I wandered up here from the Broomielaw yesterday, and they took it in and brought it up here to see if the bairn would like it. There's 9 good lives in that wee body, and it has the makings of a grand cat in it. That's the cat for me.
The old chief said not a word, but he rolled up the sleeves of his shroud and, raising his bony arms, began making passes over the head of the young ghost. The mother and father never noticed the 2 ghosts standing at the foot of the bed, and presently there was only one ghost there. The young ghost was gone. The old chief turned from the bed and went away. The young ghost, as soon as he knew that he was all in the kitten, and he really was the kitten himself, with 4 fine legs to leap about on, and 2 fine ears to twitch, and a fine long tail to swish, was so full of joy and delight that he began to dance at the foot of the bed. The thumping of the kitten's feet drew the lad's attention. He stirred and opened his eyes and looked at the kitten as it leapt and twisted and turned. The lad watched for a minute and the light came back into his eyes. He pulled himself up on the pillow and he sat and pointed at the dancing kitten. And he laughed. It was a weak sort of laugh and hardly worth the name, but it was a happy one. The kitten was the first thing he'd taken notice of for weeks, and he was enchanted with it. The bairn's mother caught the kitten up and kissed it on its little black nose, and the bairn's father rang for the cook and told her to bring it a bowl of cream. The doctor came and said that undoubtedly the kitten had saved the lad's life. There was never a kitten so petted and spoiled before. The lad grew better and better, and after a while he was well and went out to play with his companions. The cat grew bigger and bigger and became the most ramp-rearing and uproarious young tomcat. He was adored by all the tabby cats for miles around and was the terror of all the other tomcats in the town. He lost one of his ears and the tip of his tail and 8 of his lives in battle, but he was always careful to save the 9th life, so as to be having one for his old age. And when at last he died, full of years and still pampered and cosseted because of the ancient service he had done the family when he saved the bairn's life, he gave up his last life most contentedly and willingly. That was because of something he had known about cats from the very beginning. Since they are given 9 lives to live, they live them all out in this world. Cats don't have ghosts. Hope you enjoyed that wee story there. Please join me again tomorrow for another one.